Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening to everybody. Welcome to this show and tell. Ichsan and Daniel from the University of New South Wales, Sydney in Australia will be talking about integrating ORCID identifiers in an institutional repository today. Before we start, I'll have a couple of service announcements to make. First of all, if you want to ask a question, then send your questions to this link. Ask a question link. It's also posted in the chat window on YouTube. Then the next thing. Don't forget about the Open Discovery Challenge. It will be ending next week. If you still have anything to submit, so the next Primo Q&A session will be hosted on August the 22nd. And just watch the regular channels, Slack, email, and so on. For updates on it. So without further ado, Daniel, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mehmet, and thanks everyone for joining us in this webinar. I'm Daniel Bangert, the Scholarly Communications Librarian at UNSW Sydney, and I'm here with Ichsan, Tamsir, Putra from Application Support. I'll switch over to our slide set and start going through the presentation. Okay, so to begin with, just a few words about the university, the institution that we work in. It's the University of New South Wales, UNSW in Sydney. We have 8 faculties and 47 schools, with a student enrolment of close to 55,000 and over 6,000 staff. In the talk today, I'll start with some introductory remarks about ORCID, just to make sure everyone's familiar with this database and organization. And then talk through the integration, starting with how it works in our current research information system, our CRIS, and then how that information flows through different systems, firstly to the institutional repository, then through the Primo discovery interface, and to external aggregators. The last part will be a little about reporting on these statistics, and a few words in conclusion. So what is ORCID? It stands for the Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier, and its mission is to provide an identifier for individuals to use with their name as they engage in research, scholarly and innovation activities. So increasingly it's become part of the scholarly communications lifecycle, the research lifecycle, and can be used in lots of different systems. The mission of the organization, apart from what I've just outlined, is multi-part. So it's firstly an identifier for researchers, but it's also a registry. It's a set of standard procedures for connecting researchers to affiliations and activities. And more generally, it's an international scale open research effort that's increasingly adopted by publishers, funders, and institutions. As of this month, there are over 3.6 million ORCID identifiers. At UNSW, we're part of one of the ORCID consortia, the Australian ORCID Consortium. And here our researchers are being strongly encouraged to sign up for an identifier. We are putting that message out through the research community in a number of different ways. But our two key messages are that it makes your research profile unique and that it can save you time managing information about your publications and grants. So on that first point, it connects you with all of your research activities and outputs. It eliminates confusion over researchers with similar names. It ensures your profile is continuous, even if you leave UNSW in the future. In terms of saving time, it can reduce repetitive data entry into systems. It may allow you to automate adding publications to systems, and it gives you complete control over which systems can access your information. And we try to follow that ORCID mantra, I guess, of enter once, reuse often, and encourage people to use it everywhere. So in our CRIS, which is known locally as the Research Output System, or ROS for short, in publisher systems, for instance, submitting manuscripts, in Scopus and Web of Science, in open access repositories, including our institutional repository, and funding bodies. Okay, so that's some background, and I'll hand over to Ichsan now to talk through the next part.
Okay, now let's look at our ORCID integration with CRIS, or Current Research Information System. In UNSW, we use Symplectic Elements for our CRIS. Being the first point of integration with ORCID, CRIS provides a nice and quick integration features with ORCID. The CRIS system admin just need to configure ORCID. The system admin just need to configure ORCID institutional key and secret, as well as ORCID API URL in CRIS. And then the users or researchers can link their CRIS user profile with their ORCID record. This linking is done in CRIS, and the authorization between CRIS and ORCID is using our protocol. Once the link to ORCID is established, using ORCID API, CRIS will periodically search ORCID and gather persistent identifiers from researchers' ORCID record that are public or read limited. Using these identifiers, elements of CRIS will then collect metadata from data sources, including PubMed, Scopus, Crossref, and automatically associate these harvested records with the researcher CRIS profile. Okay, back to Daniel now.
Okay, so once that link is established in the CRIS system, the researchers can deposit to the institutional repository. Our IR is a Fedora repository known locally as UNSWorks. To deposit a work to the repository, the author first claims the publication in the CRIS or creates a manual publication record. They can then link the publication record to a grant, for instance, funded by one of our major funding bodies in Australia, and they can also deposit the manuscript. Following deposit, the metadata is made available in the institutional repository, and it has a Primo discovery interface, and the manuscript is available post-embargo, that's if an embargo has been applied. Then for all authors that have linked their ORCID identifier to their user profile in the CRIS system, the identifier is displayed as a link in the Primo interface. A little more detail on the institutional repository metadata. So behind the scenes, metadata is crosswalked from a proprietary schema in the CRIS to mods version 3.6 in the Fedora repository. As you can see on the screen, the author's ORCID identifier is mapped to the name identifier element in mods. And this element is within mod's name, which also holds the family and given name of the author. Okay, over to Ichsan.
All right, so now in Primo, we display ORCID link in Primo detail tabs link section. The ORCID link is displayed as author name hyperlink followed by the ORCID ID icon. And clicking the ORCID link will display ORCID page that contains author name, work, and affiliation that the author decided to make public. So there are 4 components in Primo ORCID link that are needed to make the link works in terms of display and linking. First is the author name. In this example, is Bangert, D as the first name. And then the second component is the ORCID, the author ORCID ID. So the example is 0000-0003-4981-2870. The third component is the ORCID ID icon, and the last component is the author ORCID URI. So Primo gets author name and author ORCID ID from our institutional repository. ORCID ID icon is fixed and it links to image in ORCID website. Author ORCID URI is something that is constructed of ORCID URL and author ORCID ID. So now after we know what we need to construct or what needed to construct ORCID link, the next thing is to analyze the source record. As mentioned earlier, our institutional repository record metadata is in mods format. In mods, name elements are separated into 3 parts: last name, first name, and the identifier. In this case is ORCID ID, as shown in the first box. If we use Primo normalization rules to construct ORCID link from these 3 name elements, it will be very complicated, especially when there are multiple authors. It would be much easier to do so with XSLT. So this is why we do a XSLT crosswalk on the author name element when we export mods metadata from institutional repository to OAI, which is also in mods format. After that, OAI metadata are harvested by Primo. The second box shows the crosswalk results of the name elements in mods, where we merge the 3 name parts into single name string that consists of last name, initial of the first name, and ORCID ID. And all are separated by pipe character. And then we put this single name string into mods node element. Now, with the much simplified author name elements in mods metadata as shown in the box, the NR transformation to PNX will be much easier now. As you can see, it is almost a direct copy of source record to PNX with a few changes, that is adding the prefix $T linked to ORCID ID, $D, as shown in the green color. And then we replace the pipe character with $1, as shown in the light blue as shown in the light blue color. The subfield $T in PNX LLN44 field means that we are using template mapping table called link to ORCID to construct this ORCID link. $D means that the text following this subfield will be used as link display text. And lastly, $1 means that the ORCID ID is used as the data passed to the link to ORCID template. We will look at how the template look like in the next slide. So after we analyze the source record and knew what to be put into the PNX fields, the next step was to configure Primo normalization rules. Out of the box, Primo PNX has ORCID field under search section and additional data section. There is none in the link section, so that's why we use one of the local link field as a ORCID link. Since we have crosswalk and simplified the author name and identifier information, the normalization rules for links field LLN44 is straightforward now. The source points to the path of the mods node that contains the name and the ORCID information. The transformation consists of 2 steps. One is to add the template name as the prefix. And second is to replace the pipe character with $1 sign to indicate that data to be used as mentioned in the previous slide. We also populate ORCID ID to search ORCID ID field to make ORCID ID searchable from Primo, and also to additional data section just for reference. The source points to the same path as a link LLN44 source for these two PNX fields. And the transformation is simpler because it only gets the ORCID ID after the pipe character. So after we are done with the normalization rules, the next thing was to set up the ORCID, link to ORCID ID in template mapping table. Link to ORCID has template code value of ORCID URL with $1 data, which is the author ORCID ID. So in the slide, it is shown as https://orchid.org and then /$1 sign. Okay, after all the data configuration were done, we also did the configuration in Views Wizard, edit full details attributes. And this is to enable the display of local link field LLN44 in Primo full view. And finally, it's the coding part. So we use jQuery Primo to append the ORCID ID icon to the ORCID link. And we put the code, this code, in the footer.html. So if you look at the way we configure ORCID link, it's such that there is no URL defined or hard-coded in the PNX. This approach gives us flexibility should the URL change. We don't have to run the no-harvest pipe just to update the URL. Instead, we only need to change the template to reflect the new URL. This has become our principle in Primo links, although in the case of ORCID, there will not or should not be any change to ORCID URI or ORCID ID icon, as they are meant to be consistent. Okay, having shown you what we have done in Primo, there are still some challenges for us. First is the Primo Analytics report on ORCID. As described earlier, we use PNX local link field for ORCID link, but the usage statistics for PNX local link are still missing in Primo Analytics. We have an active Salesforce case with exhibits on this issue, and as a workaround, we use Google Analytics and other reporting service to report on ORCID-related statistics, which Daniel will talk in the next slides. So the second challenge for us is the ORCID in PCI records. There was a post in Primo list in March 2016 about this topic, and basically there are no news since then. And until now, we still haven't seen any ORCID information in PCI records at PNX search or additional data sections. We only see it in the display description section. And Primo Roadmap January 2017 also has first half 2017 to increase the population of open access indicators and ORCID. And we think that this roadmap should apply equally to PCI content as well. And the third challenge for us is to implement the ORCID link in Primo new UI. Currently, the ORCID link display in Primo new UI is missing ORCID ID icon, but the link is working as expected. So there are still some works for us to fix the icon insertion in AngularJS framework, since jQuery Primo is not working in Primo new UI. Okay, I'll pass to Daniel to talk about the integration with external aggregators.
Okay. A number of external discovery services also harvest our IR metadata. So I have a couple of examples just to show how the ORCID information is being transferred. The first one is from the Trove service, which is provided by the National Library of Australia. It aggregates metadata from Australian libraries, museums, repositories, and other research and collecting organizations. In the screenshot, you can see that the ORCID identifiers are displayed as a link. There are two there in that example under related resources. Another example is from BASE, which is an academic search engine that aggregates metadata from journals, repositories, and digital collections around the world. This is the same record again, and you can see ORCID links in the relations field. As Ichsan mentioned before, we are collecting some statistics on ORCIDs in our ORCID IDs in our repository from a tool called the Repository Reporting Service. This is querying our Fedora repository directly to find all the records with ORCID ID information and populating that reporting database with this information. So the service produces various reports, including a content report that is giving us statistics on, firstly, records with ORCID IDs in our repository, UNSWorks, and UNSW authors with ORCID identifiers in UNSWorks. And these are year-to-date and monthly figures. As of today, we have 3,700 odd records with ORCID IDs in the repository and about 1,000 UNSW authors with ORCID IDs in the repository. So a few remarks in conclusion. As is the case in many institutions, UNSW sees ORCID as a strategic priority and is moving towards a mandate for researchers to have an identifier. More broadly, in the Australian context, our funders and other bodies are encouraging researchers to use this in many different systems. It allows for efficient exchange of data, and the way we've integrated taking the verified ORCID link that the researcher themselves has made within the CRIS system ensures that we capture the right identifier and use it through all the other systems where that information then flows through the repository, of course through Primo and external aggregators. The repository integration also increases visibility of ORCID as a tool. It's somewhere, another place they can see it, and it creates some awareness around what it is and what it does. And by implementing it as a link, it also aids discovery for information about the author or anything else on their public profile that they've populated. So that could be a bio, that could be other works that they've added. So the idea is that that link will lead them on to other relevant information. Okay, that's the main part of our presentation. We're very happy to take questions. So I might just switch back to the video screen, and please let us know if you have questions or topics for discussion.
Yeah, there are no questions at the moment. There are a couple of remarks from Knut from the Royal Library of Denmark. He says that according to the August release notes, display of images should work. Why do I hear myself? Okay. And he also says that they removed the ORCID logo for now and will try to reintroduce it once the August release is there. I'm looking at the questions. There are no questions at the moment, so it must be extremely clear to everybody.
Mehmet, can you repeat the first part? I just didn't catch Knut's comment.
Okay, he says that according to the August release notes, that displaying of images in the new UI, in the links, that it will be available. So the Orchid, showing the Orchid logo there should work from the August release on. And they, at the moment, they are not showing the Orchid logo in the new UI, but they will try to reintroduce it once the August release is there.
Oh, okay, great.
So anybody else have questions? Ask them now. Okay, I think nobody has a question at the moment. If you might have a question, then you can always, there are the questions, okay. All right, so this is a question from Knut. How would we get around to make similar links based on ORCID IDs and PCI records? So Primo Central.
All right, I think talking about PCI records, since we don't have a control on the PCI record, so this is really, I think, dependent on Ex Libris. And since also there's no so-called specific ORCID link, I mean, so the ORCID field in the link section. So I would say this could be an enhancement. But what we really look into it now is that probably for the first stage is to include the ORCID in the search section, so it make it searchable from Primo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but if the ORCID ID would be available in the Primo Central records, then you could show a link.
Well, I think not through normalization rules, but
not during display time. Yeah.
Yeah, something that we can change from the UI.
Mm-hmm.
Or not. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Does it answer?
That is an answer.
I mean, does it answer your question, Knut?
Maybe he'll reply in a while.
Oh.
Or Knut, you can do a thumbs up on the question screen. Then we know that the question was answered. So the next question: will the researchers' publications metadata be pushed from the CRIS to the repo, or does the researcher have to upload their pubs to the repo manually?
It happens in a few different ways. So there's a workflow for publications that have a grant link to them. That metadata record will go to the repository, or they can upload a manuscript manually. For some sources like Europe PMC, there is some throughputing of the manuscripts. So there is automated discovery, but most of the manuscripts would be uploaded manually. So those are the two workflows for records flowing from the CRIS to the repository.
And this happens automatically, right? So Symplectic synchronized automatically with Fedora, or did you have to write some middleware for it?
Yep. Sorry, I think the researcher.
So how does the integration work between Chris?
So, like Daniel mentioned that if we based on the certain business, I mean the certain rules of the publication. So if it has a well, I mean, if it has the the publication of an attachment, then symplectic elements will. Sorry, the author will upload the publication through the symplectic element interface, and symplectic element will interact directly with the Fedora.
So it happens.
So you only have to configure it basically. You did not have to do any code writing to make this happen.
No, we don't have to do any code writing.
That's
the symplectic elements, they provide a connector. So it's coming out is that it can connect the elements and Fedora, so that when researcher upload the publication through via elements, it will be automatically pushed to Fedora.
Okay. I have another question just in between. The uploaded publication, do you make it full text searchable in Primo?
Yes, we make it full text searchable.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you do this as an add-on question? Do you use the file splitter to make this happen, or?
All right, because we just migrated to SAS.
Mm-hmm.
Before we migrate to SAS, I mean, in local environment, yes, we use a file splitter to extract out the PDF and then put the first 10,000 of the text as the what do you call it, as the PNX extension.
Mm-hmm.
So with the move to SAS, so we can't have our own, since we can't have our customized file splitter. So what we did is that this extraction of the full text, we move it to somewhere before when we export the metadata from Fedora to our OAI. So during this export, actually we call the same method as what we have in our old file splitter, just to extract out the full text from PDF, and then I think put it in the text, and then convert it into a text. And then in Primo pipe, it's still called what do you call it, the standard file splitter. And we just provide the URL that point to this text.
Okay.
Into the metadata, yes, so that the standard file splitter can extract out those texts.
Okay, interesting. Maybe you should do a talk on the file splitter one time. Yeah.
That's an interesting topic. Yeah.
So another question. Can you describe how your researchers get their ORCID linked to UNSW?
Sure. So when we speak to researchers about signing up with ORCID, we always ask them to register through the CRIS. So that can be done entirely within the CRIS system if they don't have an ORCID, or if they do have one, they can verify that that is their ORCID within the CRIS as well. But the starting point is always to go into that system and make sure their user profile there includes an ORCID identifier.
Okay. So and does this mean that they have to register with the Elements environment?
Yes. Yeah. So they will already have access to that system. That's for all active researchers. So that's staff and higher degree research students.
There's a lot of stuff happening in the chat. So Lucas from the University of Amsterdam is saying that that Xlibris has to add the ORCID links to the PCI records. At the time being, there are no ORCID IDs in Primo Central, as I understand it. And then they talk about submitting an enhancement request or an idea for this. I don't see any new questions coming in. So let's end this if there are no questions anymore. Just going to wait a couple of seconds. All right then. Okay. So thank you, Ichsan and Daniel, for your great presentation. Thank you everybody for joining us. And the next show and tell will be on August 22nd. And will be on the new Primo UI. So you can ask your questions and somebody from Xlibris or a group of people from Xlibris will try to answer them. Also, if I'm not mistaken, Daniela going to be there, and also Jeff from the University of Minnesota is going to be there, if I'm correct. So then Gabriela Hoffler and Jeff Peterson, those are the correct names. They will be there discussing what they've been doing at their university with the new UI, and then there is the Q&A with Xlibris. So thank you, and see you next time.